If anyone were to ask me what was the most embarrassing moment of my life, I know it like this. I could tell you in an instant. My family came from Kansas. I was born out here, and my dad grew up in a little town called Ness City. It's one of these towns like about 1,000. In fact, I was coming down the 2 freeway one day, and I noticed the population of Los Angeles City, not the county, the city. There's more in the city than the entire state of Kansas. So you got all these little communities. Told you before, my mother came from a town of 29 people. So everybody knows everybody, everyone knows everybody's business. In fact, in this city, Ness City, when I go back to visit, I understand. If you leave your keys, do not leave your keys. Do not leave your keys near ignition when you go into the store. They're insulted. You think someone would steal your car here? You don't lock your front door. That's just crazy. And if you lock your car door, they want to cry. They just think that is just absurd. So this is a little tiny town. And I went back there with a friend from California. I was going to show off my family and Kansas. And so I said, just follow me. Watch what I'm going to do. Now, my dad was a real prankster. He was always doing all kinds of things. For example, you know that my family names rhyme. We're Larry, Perry, Barry, Terry, Jerry, Gary, Mary, Eddie. And so my dad, Eddie, I never once, ever in my entire life remember him not doing this. Every time he answered the phone, somebody would say, inevitably, one of the Aries, "Is Perry there?" And he'd say, "Did you say Terry?" "No, Perry." "Oh, Gary." And he just keeps switching the names until the person got frustrated and he says, "I'll get them for you." So, and then he walked away smiling. He loved it. So I knew he would be very happy with what I did, as was my uncle. But this is what I did. I took my friend and said, "Just follow me. Just follow me." So I go into the house that I thought was my uncle's, and I walk in. I said, I shouted out when I got in the back door, "What do you have to do to get a blankety blank blank cup of coffee in this town?" I didn't know the people, and they didn't know me. And we just looked at each other for a moment, and I said, "Is this Robert Dean's house?" He said, "No." And I said, "Oh, excuse me." I was one block off. So that was my worst moment. Now, the reason I share it with you is because I think we have today the worst moment, the most embarrassing moment in the apostles' lives in this story today. Not the most shameful. The most shameful, inevitably, was not being at the cross, by the side of Jesus. He died. Only John was there, only in John's gospel. So that, and of course, Peter's denial of Jesus in the garden. I don't even know the man. But this one was embarrassing. Jesus last week and this week again repeats it. He shares with them as they're going from town to town. He shares with them that he had to be handed over by men who would kill him, and then he would be raised up. They didn't know what he was talking about, so they just remained silent. But then they started Jesus called it an argument. It also says a discussion as they were going from Galilee to Capernaum. When they got to Capernaum, they went in the house, and after they were in the house alone with Jesus, he spoke to, and it says not the apostles, but the 12. Now, the 12 is a title in the Bible. You see, because there were 12 apostles and there were also 12 tribes of Israel. So in the Old Testament, the 12 tribes were the foundation of Israel. And in the New Testament, the 12 men would be the foundation of the church. It's this 12 supplanting or fulfilling that 12. So when it says that Jesus spoke to the 12, this is a very formal thing to say. He was teaching his pillars. And he just told them again what would have to happen, that he'd have to be killed and then rise from the dead. And they didn't understand it. But they began a discussion, an argument over something. And so Jesus says, after they get in the house in private, he says, "What were you arguing about on the road?" Now, apparently he knew, because they don't tell him. It says they said nothing. And then the narrative of the text tells us what they were arguing about was, what were they arguing about? Who's the greatest? Among the 12, who's the greatest? And so Jesus says, if you want to be first, you have to be last. You have to become servant of all. This is his teaching. And then to make it even more explicit, or to use an example that would maybe elucidate it, he said, see this child, he puts a little child from him, puts his hands on him, he says, whoever accepts this child in my name accepts me, and then whoever accepts me accepts not me, but my Father. And what Jesus was saying in so many words was, we have to be connected with our God, and the way to do it is to become last. Now I'll create some new words here. In your lastness, you will find first-ness. In your last-ness, being last, you'll find what it means to be first. And it isn't because it's something you believe or think in your head, it's something that you do. And in fact, Jesus spent more time talking about what to do than what to believe. He didn't give volumes of you have to think this, believe this, have this truth, profess this. He said you have to love, you have to give, you have to do. And this is one of those truths that you can only get it by getting it. Only by doing it can you really get it. And it's not just about being last, like choosing the last place in the line, because you can do that and go, oh, I'm last again today. Oh, well, I guess I'm first now. No, being last in joy. Being servant to all in joy. Letting someone step in front of you and I say, that's all right, go ahead. Enjoy. Not secretly saying, what a creep. I'm so sick and tired of people butting in front of me. Go ahead, you can be first. No, it's about joyfully letting another go before us. Joyfully finding a life and a love in serving others, serving everyone. And he says to us, he said to the disciples, and he says to us, that's where you discover the kingdom of God. That's what the kingdom of God is about. Now, I'm looking at a few hundred people here. What if we got this gospel today, and then we made this pledge? Today, or if we want to be super crazy Christians, we said, this week, I'm going to live this gospel. I'm going to serve everybody. Everyone goes first. I will gladly, joyfully take the last place. Could you imagine? This is a revolution. And Jesus was after these kinds of revolutions. A community of love. You know that song that we sing, and they'll know they are Christians by their love. By their love, yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. Really? Isn't that silliness? Isn't that just some kind of, goofy, touchy-feely thing? Oh, they'll know we're Christians by our love. No, Jesus meant it. They will know we are Christians by the way that we love one another. They will see our Christian life alive in us by the way that they serve. This is opening the kingdom to us. Now, in contrast to this gospel, we have these first two readings. The first one comes from wisdom literature, and it's referring to the just one, the Son of God. It's not referring directly to Jesus except through our eyes as Christians, because it was written way before Jesus. It was referring to anyone who was so connected with God, especially the prophets, that they would get in the face of others to say, what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing isn't good. You have to change your lives. People hate hearing that. So they hated the prophets, and they said they wanted to seize them, beset them, and destroy them. And then to add to it, they said this, not only wanted to destroy them because they think they're so right and they're the just one, but because as the sons of God, they claim this, they believe that God will protect them from anything. So let's land on them. Let's destroy them and see if God does. Well, God didn't even do that to his own son. He ended up on the cross after horrible, horrible torture and rejection. And in fact, even as he's dying on the cross, the people were saying the last insult, well, if you're really the Son of God, come down from that cross. And he didn't. He died on it. Oh, he came down, but dead. Now, what refers to Jesus, or in this wisdom literature to the just one, this is also reserved for you and me. We are the sons and daughters of God by baptism. And so Jesus again is telling us we have to celebrate our lastness to come into being the firstness. And if we don't, we'll see what we see in the letter of James. And James writes the community that he had built up, and he says, what's going on with you people? Why the wars and the factions? Why are you so divided? And this is the conclusion. Because you're serving your own passions. I want what I want when I want it. You hear that, God? I want it, and I want it right now. Give it to me. That's how they're living. And instead of choosing to be last and servant to all, they want to be first and be served by all. And so he says, even when you pray, you ask and you don't receive because you don't ask right. You ask for, I want what I want when I want it. Instead of saying, Lord, I'm here to serve everyone. I'm here to be last. It's only in that spirit, joyfully done, that the kingdom begins to grow and we find ourselves in perfect alignment with our God. And Jesus says, if you accept this child in my name, then you accept me, but you don't accept me really, you accept the one who sent me. And we find ourselves in tune with, in alignment with, and sharing the life of our God. Today, Jesus invites us into a whole different spirit. And if we hear it, he assures us that we will find life.